everyone, and welcome to 121 in Flux. I am Peter, and joining me as always is Connor.
Yes, it is.
We talk about movies on this show. Well, finally, after a several month hiatus, we did have an episode last week. We talked about our top 10 trilogies, which we promised a long time ago. Whereas this week, we are finally back to talking about movies. And because we took a few months off because of other things we were doing, because we had busy schedules, and time just wasn't there, we have a few Patreon vote winners, because we do every month on patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. We put up 4 movies for our patrons to vote on in the $5 tier and up. And because we've had a few months without doing any episodes, we've got 3 or 4 of those winners to do in a row. So that'll actually be the next few episodes, is just us working through these vote winners. Do
you know, I'm a little shocked we actually got to this week.
Why?
Because last time you said, "Oh, we'll be back with a movie next week," and every time you say that, it goes wrong. On any of our shows, whenever you say, "Oh, we will be back next week with this," something tends to go wrong when you make that declaration. So
yeah, usually something with you goes wrong, and
that is just fundamentally untrue.
You make me look like a liar, and that's on you. But anyway, the vote for this one, this month that we're catching up on, was a 4 Criterion Collection movies, and the winner was A Night to Remember from 1958. So that's what we're going to talk about. We'll start spoiler free, of course, although it is a movie about the Titanic. So I mean,
you might be able to guess how it ends.
It hits an iceberg, all right. What you want from it? So yeah, in fact, to be honest, I don't think there is any spoilers for this. No, I'm really thinking about it. It's not like James Cameron's Titanic, where there's like a love plot that you could potentially spoil the end of, or like who survives or whatever. It's a very kind of
specific characters.
Yeah, but it's a very fly in the wall, not a documentary, but it definitely just kind of goes along with the idea that it's
this is what happened.
This is what happened. Yeah. So Night to Remember is a movie about Titanic, and it's kind of very matter-of-fact about how it presents everything. Interesting to watch now, I think, from a present-day perspective, because I think we both grew up with Titanic, with James Cameron's Titanic. We were both kids when that came out.
Yeah.
It was the biggest thing on the planet for a year.
Yeah.
I think...
Much like the Titanic itself.
Yeah, much like the Titanic itself. I think what's weird about this review, I think, is that a lot of it is going to be comparing it to the newer film, because I feel like that is the point for comparison that I have.
It is, but it's also kind of unfair.
Well,
in the sense
no, because I don't mean comparing quality. That's not what I mean. I don't mean that at all.
No, I mean is they're doing such different things that they're not even trying to do the same things. It's kind of unfair to even, other than that they're the same subject matter, there is nothing else that really links these movies.
Well, no, because you're missing the point of what I was going to say. Because for me, the big thing watching this movie was the surprise at how many of the same moments and places are in both films. Because it kind of confirms just how much of what's in Titanic is clearly based on like some real accounts of what was going on, because there's so many moments of like, I recognize that staircase, that was in the other movie. I recognize this idea that this guy stays with the ship, or these violins are playing. Like, these are all clearly things that people have like shared stories about from the real Titanic that they're in both movies. To the point that made it feel kind of weird, to the point I was like, this is just like the modern Titanic but without the actual main characters. Like, there was a point where I kind of felt like that.
Yeah, it's the undramatized version, isn't it?
To a point, yeah, that's kind of what it felt like. There is one kind of subplot element that's not in the newer one, which was quite interesting, and because it wasn't in the newer one, was the most interesting part of the film for me.
Sure.
I was so interested in it that I actually went to Wikipedia afterwards just to find out, was that accurate? Did that really happen, or is it just in this movie? Only to find out that it did really happen, and was like, okay, this is actually really interesting. That's this element that wasn't in the newer one. It added this kind of like frustrating element to the real story of Titanic.
Okay, yeah.
And it makes you kind of like get upset at human incompetence, I suppose, in a lot of ways.
Doesn't take much, does it?
It doesn't take much. Honestly, actually, my biggest takeaway from this movie is how awful human beings are, because the one thing this movie actually plays with even more than the newer one is the class difference between the first class and like the poorer. What do they call the
steerage?
Steerage, yeah, whatever they call the lower class one. But like, it focuses so much on how all the rich people care more about their possessions. They don't take things seriously. They're complaining about how cold it is when they're being evacuated, things like that. Whereas like the ship's sinking, you crazy old bat, get on the boat. Get on the lifeboat. But yeah, it was actually I was expecting more differences. I was expecting so much of what's in James Cameron's Titanic to be more fictionalized, I suppose, and obviously the main story with the romance is, but a lot of it's actually the same.
The details around it.
Yeah, but a lot of the rest of it's actually the same. Like I was watching this movie and I was like, this is the same.
I suspect that's what makes that movie work as well as it does, in the sense that if you want to tell a lie, surround it in as much truth as you possibly can, and that lie seems more believable, right?
I think that's a weird way to phrase it, though. I mean, because it's not a lie.
No. But
it's a story.
It is, and I know. But I wanted to use that there, where okay, you want to tell this made-up story, this made-up love story, this romance plot.
Mm-hmm.
You surround it in so much authentic, real detail and events that it feels as real as they do. Like and it doesn't feel disparate.
There's even some characters though. I mean, obviously there was going to, the captain in both is likely based on the same person. The person who designed the ship, okay, likely the same person, right? But even like there was a character in this who I went, oh, this is Kathy Bates from Titanic. Like I know it's her. I'm like, this is clearly I didn't realize that was based on a real person who was on the ship, but clearly it was, because both this and 1997's Titanic both have this character. So clearly there's these things here. And obviously, I assume Cameron has seen this, because Cameron is obsessed with like Titanic. So I assume he's seen this movie numerous times. He knows.
There's no way he hasn't.
Yeah, I'm assuming he knew this movie back to front, and I'm assuming that he knew what was accurate in it and what wasn't and stuff. I wanted to and didn't have time, because we were going to record this yesterday and we delayed it for a day. And the one silver lining to that for me is I was going to try and listen to the commentary track from Criterion, because I listened to the first minute of it because I was like, oh yeah, because the commentary track. And what's fascinating about it is that it's like, I can't remember who the second person was, but the first person was like an expert of the actual Titanic. And I listened to the first couple of minutes and I was like, oh, this is going to be a fascinating listen, because it's this person who just knows what's real and what's not, and was going to like go through it and say, okay, this is how accurate this is, or here's what, really, or, it just, I was like, okay, that's going to be a fascinating listen at some point, is to sit and listen to that. I never had time, unfortunately, but
that's a shame. It's funny because I know of one major thing they got wrong. Not their fault. It was something that they didn't know till later.
Oh, sure.
But there was one relatively huge thing that is just totally inaccurate.
I think I may know this, but I assumed it was a technical reason they couldn't do the effect.
No.
Is it what I'm thinking it is?
It is, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm fairly sure you're on the right line when you've said that. No, nothing to do with that.
Wait, so none of the eyewitnesses in the lifeboats happened to mention this or saw it?
I don't think they'd have known.
Okay.
Because the damage to the ship is underwater, right?
I'm just thinking of how it's shown in the new movie, though. I'm thinking of like all the people in the lifeboats can clearly see it happen.
Well, okay, yeah, it's probably amped up a little bit in that movie.
Sure, okay, right. So it wasn't as visually spectacular.
Probably not. Otherwise, they might. That's very dark. Maybe they wouldn't have seen. At night without light like that. You know, it doesn't take a lot of distance, so you can't really see anything.
That's true, because all the lights in the ship go out, and it's not like obviously it's a movie, so they make sure we can see stuff, whereas in real life it's much darker. It's kind of like whenever you're underwater, it's just pitch black. But even James Cameron's own movie, The Abyss, kind of cheats a little bit, so you can see
exactly
what's going on.
It has to, because it's a movie, right? But that was something they didn't know until later.
That's interesting. So. I actually just assumed that was a technical thing. They just couldn't do the effect.
Yeah, I think it's the Titanic. We can probably just talk about what we're talking about here, right?
Sure, yeah. It's split in half, as before it goes under the water.
That's until they went down to the wreckage in, I think, 85. They didn't know that it had split in half. Yeah, so when they made this movie, they literally they just worked on the assumption that this is what happened.
Because I assumed that they maybe even did a test and was like, oh, this looks crap. Like, because we're using models, this just doesn't look good, so we're just not going to do it.
Which, for the most part, the models look fairly good.
They do. There's a couple. There's the odd shot where they show people in windows and stuff, and it's clear they're just little cutouts as opposed to actual people. But
the wide shots of the models tend to look pretty good.
Yeah, really not bad. Like, it's actually quite impressive. This is 1958. Obviously, it's it's 39 years before James Cameron's Titanic, and it's interesting just how much of a leap between the two films are.
I think the only thing in terms of the models that consistently doesn't look that good is the iceberg.
That's true. Yeah. Actually, you're right.
It is weird. It always looks like a cardboard paper mache sort of thing.
What's funny is, again, it's just all these small, even down to the guy up top who shouts out "iceberg ahead." Like, even that line of dialogue's like the identical to the newer movie, which I assume means it's just based in fact. Like, that's just what was said exactly,
probably
verbatim. Very interesting. Just seeing like how much of it actually still lines up with the modern Titanic. Which does lead us to the question of, though, is it worth watching? Does it have enough things on its own to make it, or is it good on its own? Like, what does it do? Because I think the obvious critique of this movie is that there isn't any main characters to kind of follow and to get attached to. It is very kind of impersonal in a weird way.
And I do think it's too impersonal.
I think so too. It got to a point, like, halfway through it, when I realized we were never really going to get to know characters, because I think there's a point at the start in the train where you're introduced to the second officer, and it felt like an introduction for him. Like, okay, he's going to be the main character. I thought, he's going to be the one we kind of follow, and he's going to be our eyes and ears through this.
He pops up maybe slightly more than some other characters. Slightly. He's definitely not enough to be a main.
I would say that he feels just about equal to the captain and maybe the telegraph, the dude, whatever his role, what the name of his role is.
Yeah.
I feel like they're just as frequent as he is. And we cut around, and it got to a point about halfway through where I went, you know what? For all the faults you might want to throw at the love story in the new one, I think it's what this one's missing. Bizarrely, maybe not that specific love story, but just characters that we focus on, that we get to know and we care about. It's missing.
It's something we talk about a lot. This is going to sound weird as a comparison now, but with like superhero movies.
Sure.
In that, there's all this destruction, and it's obviously, it's terrible. The city's being destroyed. But unless we know someone who's on the ground on a personal level in the story, it's hard to give a shit.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's very much that.
It's kind of saying here where, yes, this is obviously a terrible event. There's lots of people about to die. This is the Titanic. But I don't care on a personal level about any of these characters.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just going to say full spoilers, because, again, there's not a lot to actually spoil. So yeah. I was going to say full spoilers, just in case something does feel like a spoiler at some point, because I wanted to say things. Like I said, the only real emotion I got out of this movie is when I got mad at people, because they were, the rich people wanting their
frustrating
their diamonds, or complaining and say, this is an outrage, we have to do this, or it's like the ship's sinking, get on the boat, you cow.
or when the poorer people are coming up and they're like, right, let's cut through one of the nice areas that we're not supposed to go through, but hey, it's an emergency, and there's a staff member there is like, what are you doing up here? Go back down to your floor.
Stop. I believe crew member would probably be more accurate.
Crew would have been more appropriate. Yeah. You're right. Yeah.
Staff member.
Do you know what it was? It's because he was like a waiter or something.
Sure. Yeah. So it's not like he's a sailor. Yeah. He's
exactly. I think that was what I was getting at.
Yeah. To be fair, yeah, on a cruise ship, I imagine you wouldn't consider them the crew. You consider them,
staff, like wait staff, kitchen staff. But I wouldn't say they're the crew.
Yeah. I feel like on a ship like this, though, they are more like the crew, bizarrely.
I'm gonna say you're probably right. I think crew might have been the correct term, but there is a reason that my head went to staff in this particular.
I mean, because obviously there's passengers, but it is a transport ship. They're traveling from, Ireland to New York. They're going this distance. Anyway, but of course the big thing was the subplot with the other ship, the California ship, the Californian, I think was the name of it. And this is the thing that wasn't in the new movie at all. So this was the thing that was like new and fresh to me, and was generally, because of that, the most interesting thing in the movie, because I was like, oh, what's this? What's going on here? And it's basically this small ship that was about 10 miles, give or take, from Titanic, which could have came and rescued a bunch more people, because it was a bigger ship. It wasn't a lifeboat. It was a big enough ship that it could have taken a few hundred probably on board.
It could have taken enough.
Yeah. And because we keep hearing about this other ship, this Carthinia or whatever it was called, that was
Catalonia, maybe.
no, it was definitely more of a there was an Arth sound in there.
Okay.
But that's coming from a distance. It's going to take 4 hours, but they know they're sinking in 90. So it's like, okay, it's going to get there to help after the fact and to take people off the lifeboats, but it's not going to be there.
There's only so much it can do.
Yeah, it's not going to help people in the process. Whereas this other ship could help them. And basically, you know, the first problem, at least in the movie, I mean, how accurate this is to real life is debatable. And there was like a, you know, when I read it on Wikipedia, there was like a hearing as to, you know, misconduct and things like that, and you know, he said, she said, kind of thing.
It happened to some degree.
Yeah. But I mean, it was definitely there. Like, it was definitely in this distance. It was definitely there and didn't help. These facts are true. But there's the telegraph operator on the Titanic basically ignored the first warning of ice. Well, not the first warning, but the major warning of ice. The reason why the small ships basically stopped moving and just went to sleep for the night is because they just, we can't pass through this tonight. It's too dangerous. We're going to just go to sleep and stay still. And, you know, when they send this warning, you know, the telegraph operator who's on this smaller ship sends us to Titanic and is basically just cut off and told, no, we've got a lot of rich people's messages to put out and they can only do one at a time. So we're going to do that. So leave us alone. Is basically his attitude. He has to get through all the rich people stuff. So it's like, okay, fine, I tried.
You do you.
I'm clocking out, and there's no actual operator on duty for the rest of the night. There's one guy who wants to listen because he's trying to learn, but he's not actually learned Morse code yet. So he's just kind of, you know, trying his best. Yeah. And they keep like waking up the captain. Like, you know, eventually Titanic's letting off flares because they know there's a small ship out there, and like, you know. The guy like calls in, and every single time the captain's woken up on the ship, he's just annoyed that he's been woken up, and he's like, "What's going on?" He's like, "Oh, the flare gun, they're sending out rockets. Like that's like 5 now." He's like, "Well, are they a color? Because if they're a certain color, they'll just be a company color to let convey information, as opposed to
some sort of signal to another company ship,
as opposed to a mayday." And he doesn't care enough to check. He just doesn't care. You know, the first time he says,
he goes, "Oh, just keep flashing them with your light and see if they respond."
Yeah, but as I read on Wikipedia, they should have known that the angle the ship was at, they'd never see it. They'd never be able to respond to it. So it's just this negligence. It's this kind of easy. And do you know what this oddly reminded me of, just in recent memory, was watching Chernobyl and just the incompetence of not accepting that something's happening, being the downfall of lots of people.
That one was worse in the sense, not obviously the scale was worse, but just in the sense that was willfully going, we don't want to think about that. Whereas this was just let me sleep.
Yeah, I mean, it's the sort of thing where he should have said, okay, that's like, let's just go over there. Let's just sail a couple of miles and just get a better look at what's going on. Like that would have been, you know, get to a better angle so they could signal them and find out what's happening, and they could have saved hundreds of lives. Because, you know, it is kind of interesting watching like this play out in 1958, like effects and the way they handle the ship sort of tipping over, and obviously it's not as bombastic as the 97 version, but you know, they do a pretty good job.
It's mostly quite subtle for a long time. You know, just you just see everything just tilt slightly every so often.
Joe, is funny though, is it does feel like it feels like it's very sort of relaxed for a long time, where like you don't feel like anything's really happening except they're talking about it's going to happen. And then, you know, once they're, because, you know, one thing that this movie does not have compared to the newer one is there's a lot of stuff of them like going through the decks as it's filling with water in the newer one. You know, there's Kate Winslet and Leo like going through all these like hallways and stuff, and the water's like up to their necks.
As soon as that water's in there, shut it off.
Yeah. So I think again that's a budget thing. It's like, no, we don't want to film like all these sets underwater and like all this stuff. Like they do it as they can. But if we're talking about the movie, I mean, it's not a bad movie. It works. It's very impressive for its time period, and it does what it does.
It's just so impersonal that it's hard to actually care as a narrative.
It reminds me bizarrely of Dunkirk, where I'm impressed with what they're doing, but I'm not really emotionally attached to a lot of it.
Yeah. I think I preferred this over Dunkirk.
That's fair. It's more straightforward and makes more sense, you know, from a narrative.
It is, and I
think
Dunkirk relied on it relied on being in a cinema, ideally IMAX. Watching it on a smaller screen does not have the desired effect whatsoever. Whereas this still has I think roughly, give or take, the same sort of effect, no matter what screen you're watching on.
No, it's a good looking movie. Like it looks good pretty much all the time. Like
Yeah.
It is just missing that personal touch. It's missing that central character or two that you really care about. And
we're not saying that they should have made up characters like like Titanic did later on, but
yeah, no, just
there's things in here. Just focusing a little bit more on what they were doing and make it just a touch more personal to them.
Because I think going with the I think the strongest feeling I had in this movie was the frustration of human error and human negligence and human sort of, again, the idea that the first class passengers are being
they're sitting playing poker while this is still happening, and and people are rushing around them, and they go, we'll be fine. It's unsinkable.
It's just how it touched it. Yeah, it's the hubris. The movie's a lot about the hubris, and that final point is made at the end as well. But
yeah,
I think what it really needed to do, because that stuff I think is the strongest in the film. I think for me it would have been better to focus on the second officer, because he's kind of the one who's in charge of trying to save everyone, essentially, once things go down. And it's the idea that his job has been made tougher by people not cooperating, by people not going along with the plan, by people, and I think that frustration, that you could have focused on that. Now, I think obviously some people might say that we're being harsh here because you have to view it through the lens of its time it's made, and that is true to a point, and I think we always try and do that. But ultimately, we're viewing this now, and we're going to review it how it works and how it plays now. Because here's the thing, I think people assume that you're going to be harsh on every movie from the past, but that's the thing, I'm not, because a lot of great movies from 50, 60, 70 years ago hold up perfectly well.
Absolutely. I mean, we've spoken about plenty of them on this show.
Yeah. And I think this movie, while technically very impressive and good in a lot of ways, suffers, and I think it suffers because it is so impersonal to me. It's exactly the sort of reason why I don't get into certain war movies, because it feels impersonal. I'll come back to this time and time again. I don't care that it's based on a real event. I'm not going to just care because it happened to real people. You still have to make me care about the characters in the movie. In fact, I'll give you one small thing towards the end that I really liked. There's a random guy who runs into a child who's been abandoned, who can't find, well, not abandoned, but can't find his mother. And this guy sort of is, well, we can't have that now, can we? Let's go and find her. Even though he knows they're going to die. He knows they're going to die. There's no hope. And even as the ship's like tipping over, he's putting his coat around him and saying, it's going to be okay. We're going to find your mother. I'm going to find your mother for you. Like, that was like the one little spark of a moment where I'm like, I actually kind of care about this guy. This guy is doing his best as a human being to make this kid feel better.
Yeah, and then you've got, climbing up onto the overturned boat. He's passing up the kid first. Like, make sure the kid's okay.
Yeah.
And looks in, and kid's obviously already dead. He just kind of just lets him back out into the water.
And it's the second officer. It's the second officer he hands the kid to, and he lets it drift out into the water because it's already dead. And I feel like that's a nice little personal touch. More of that would have been good. More characters that we just knew, because I can't name you a single character in this movie. I don't know any of their names because none of them are characters to that extent.
We've talked a few on, right, like captain, second officer.
Yeah, that is the best of what we have to offer.
And I don't think it's worth. Usually we'd make an effort. We'd get the IMDb page up and go through, okay, who's who, with their names, to at least try and make an effort. I don't think it's worth it here because the film doesn't try to make an effort with them as characters either. None of them. It doesn't bother trying to tell me their names. It doesn't matter to this story.
No, it really doesn't. And that's kind of the what I would say is the main problem with it is.
Yeah,
that I don't feel a personal attachment to the characters.
No, I think the point, if I'm going to try and defend this decision, is it feels impossible because it's just trying to show the scale and look how many people. Why should we focus in on one or two when there's hundreds here? And I understand that as an idea, as a concept. I just think as a narrative, it suffers because of it.
No, I do too. So, and again, this is viewing it from how we look at movies in 2019, and I do think that this is an interesting film to watch. I think it's worth watching because it is from a different era. It's worth watching to see how they handled this like 40 plus years ago, or 50 plus now. But in fact, hell, almost
60,
almost 60, yeah, like 60 last year.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's over 60.
Yeah, well, well, that's because I forgot that it's been 20 years since Titanic, all right? Like,
I know.
That still feels recent to me, and yet it's 22 years old now.
It's because Cameron's still off there making huge movies that again, well, it can't have been that long ago.
Yeah, it's because Cameron's only had one movie come out since Titanic, so it feels like just a short amount of time. So
that's depressing, isn't it?
It's impossible not to think about Titanic when you're watching this, and even down to the moment of the guy sneaking on the ship, and then the guy letting the ship go down, the lifeboat go down anyway. Like that moment's in the new one, but I think it's Billy Zane's character in the new one who does that, the sly little move. Yeah. So it's a more prominent character in the new one, but that moment's there. So again, I assume there was a story about someone doing this. That, yeah. So it's a neat little beat. It's very well made. It's very much of its time, and seeing the carnage, mixed in with the rich people just complaining that it's an inconvenience, is a real interesting study of the hubris of some of the characters, and how even once it's sinking, it's like, oh, I can't. Even the captain's like, oh, it can't be sunk, and the guy who built the ship's the first one to go, no, it's going to sink. Like, no, like because of what's happening, it's going to sink.
I might have screwed up.
Yeah. So he goes down with his ship, and as does the captain. Although I noticed that it didn't make as much of a big moment out of the captain staying with the ship in the same way.
No, it really doesn't. He's there, but he's there with most of the other men. Yeah,
because in the new movie, there's a moment where he's on the bridge, and the water comes in the windows, and it's kind of this big moment. Whereas here, it's just there. But you've got the string quartet playing,
Chopin's funeral march, I believe.
Yeah. You know better than I do the pieces they're playing out.
It was when he starts playing, not when they start playing after he plays on his own and they come back. Not that one. The bit before where he goes, right, number 24 or whatever it was. Sure. That one. That one, Chopin's funeral march, and I got a good chuckle out of that. I mean, I don't know if that was actually what they played, but I mean, there would have been a nice irony. To them, it's gallows humor at that point.
Oh, sure. Yeah, if this was happening now, I'd like to think they'd start playing Highway to Hell or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, but that is, gallows humor. Well, we're gonna die. Let's have some fun with it, right?
So honestly, I was watching this and I was actually worried, like halfway through it, like how much am I going to have to say about this movie, because it's going through the beats of what's happening. I guess cause that's why I'm saying that the most interesting parts of it to me is just to compare it to the new one and just talk about all the beats that are in both movies, because it's the thing that was sticking out to my mind for the most part. Because ultimately, because there's no interesting characters to really latch on to and talk about the journey and the suspense and the, are they going to be one of the characters who survives or not? It doesn't have quite the same drama to it to really dive into.
It doesn't. It's supposed to feel faux documentary, like it's just it's a documentation of this is what happened, but on a relatively big budget scale. But because it's doing that approach, it just loses any dramatic tension.
Yeah, and I actually think it's a little bit overlong because they had the iceberg relatively early on in the movie. It's not like
it's maybe half an hour in at most.
Yeah, it's not like the newer one where there's a lot of build up before they get to that point. It happens relatively early on, and then the stuff after that's fine, where it's like, okay, they're starting to realize something's wrong, they're assessing the damage, yada yada yada. But there's a point about an hour in or so where, okay, they're starting to fill lifeboats, and I went, how's there an hour left of this? How's there an hour left where we're at the point where we're already filling lifeboats? And I do think that the back half did drag a little bit. In the middle of that portion, like, when they're still filling lifeboats, and it's been another half an hour since we started filling lifeboats.
It's a bit of just on a conceptual level, with the way the ship is filling with water, the more it fills, the quicker it then fills, the quicker it goes down, right? And the quicker it goes down, the more it fills again. So it's constantly getting faster and sinking quicker because of the way it's done. So it should feel like, okay, it's getting tense. We're getting quicker. We're running out of time more and more and more as we're going on, and I don't feel that.
Yeah, the ticking clock's not quite there, I don't think,
because it should be speeding up as it goes, whereas it always just feels consistent.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's rough.
But it's definitely not a bad movie.
Oh, no, I don't want to be too harsh on it, because it's a really solidly made film that looks good. obviously there's no great performances in the sense that because everyone's just got a little to do.
No one's got enough.
Yeah, but no one's bad. Like everyone is kind of doing the small parts well.
All the rich people are suitably contemptible.
Yeah, and like I say, the stuff with the other ships and the idea that some of it could have been prevented, or some of the people could have been saved.
Yeah, and that's very clearly the message of the film, because at the end it talks about how now everyone has enough lifeboats to fill all the maximum people rather than just the bare minimum.
Yeah, I mean, even just outside of that, just the final point that the second officer makes is, the problem here is that we all believed it couldn't happen. It was the hubris of thinking we'd built something unsinkable. So, and that extends to why there wasn't enough lifeboats. It was just enough for regulation, not enough to actually save everyone.
Yeah, and the idea that it had happened before. Of course it had. He's saying he himself had been shipwrecked before. But even though it had happened before, you still think it wouldn't happen anyway.
So it's just about accepting that it can happen and prepping for it. It's about not assuming that you're untouchable and not assuming that bad things can't happen. And that had they just made the appropriate preparations, all of this needless tragedy could have essentially been avoided outside of the actual ship itself going down. But ultimately, what is that? It's metal and rivets and whatever. Who cares? The people are what important. And it's something like 70% of the people on the ship died. So, it's a big tragedy.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think they saved. I think they said in this they saved about 700 odd out of
2,200. No, I was looking at the wiki page. I was looking up the facts afterwards. There's like a table of percentages of overall how many were saved, but also how many of the first class were saved, how many of the women were saved, how many of the children were saved. Like it went into great detail, and obviously the lower class had the lowest percentage in every conceivable.
Oh, I'm sure.
Bracket.
But then presumably the women and children are significantly higher than the men, I assume.
Yes, but like it's not a great percentage in the whereas the first class it was like a really high percentage for the women and children. They definitely were prioritizing a little bit in terms of class. Definitely. So no, very very good. So the movie's really solid. It's kind of a thing though where because it takes this very no nonsense approach, it ultimately could use a bit more pizzazz.
It's more something I'd recommend as a curiosity rather as something. Okay, sit down and watch a great movie as a story in its own right.
I feel like though, depending on your taste, though, you might get into this a bit more than we did. I think if you like something that feels a bit more just like an accurate account of something, you're probably going to get a lot more into it. Whereas I am not someone who's into that typically. I need it to be a movie. I need it to be a story, and that's not what this is. Yeah,
it's why when we have like the biographical pictures that dramatize someone's life, some people get really annoyed when they change details and they play with the rules, play with the events that happened in the timeline and things like it happened a lot last year with oh god, what was the name of the Queen film that came out last year?
I don't know.
Rami Malek. I've forgotten the name of the damn film.
I thought you meant the Queen, as in the Queen of
no
England. Bohemian Rhapsody.
Thank you. And there are things at the end of that where they change the timeline. Okay, they have something happen before this moment instead of after, and people were furious about that. I'm like, I don't care if it makes a better movie narratively, right? It's if it's a movie. If I want the facts, I can go and read the facts. I can watch a documentary. If I want a narrative movie, which is at that point what I'm after, I want to see what works best for the story. If you have to change a few details, so be it.
What's funny about that to me is that it's still not enough. I would describe myself as someone who doesn't like biographies almost entirely. I mean, there's a few exceptions, but ultimately a real person's life is a hard thing to turn into a movie, because ultimately, even if you change some stuff to try and make it fit into the structure of a movie, it still doesn't work for me because it just doesn't feel like it fits.
No, I get that. Like, a great example is Darkest Hour, the Churchill film from a couple of years ago. There's a huge scene at the end. It was in trailers and stuff as well, but a big scene on the tube where it's this huge pivotal moment in the movie, and it just didn't happen. This moment never happened at all. But and again, it made a better narrative movie, so I'm okay with it.
The end of Chernobyl's that actually, because Chernobyl's a pretty accurate thing up
Yeah.
until towards the end, but that final episode, which was mostly fabricated to kind of like encapsulate kind of what the show was doing, is such a great dramatic ending to the show that I would never change it.
I bet there are some people who utterly despise it because of that.
Probably, but I think it was the right thing to do. I think it was the right thing to do.
We tend to come down on the same side of this, whereas you would agree a lot of them don't go far enough for you, and it still feels like, okay, this is one person's
there's
life,
very few biographies that I like. There's very few historical films that I like. Ultimately they just don't work for me that much, because I think I'd rather have a documentary that just actually does it factually correct to the best of their ability, rather than try to dramatize it if they're not going to. Because like, I don't know. Like, I don't mind something being based on a true story. Like if someone, when I watch Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and someone says, hey, it's technically based on the true story of Ed Gein, I'm like, okay, there's some inspiration, but it's not the story of Ed Gein. Like, that's not what it is. It's a story that was made from scratch. It's just inspired in a couple of details by that. Whereas something like this, this is clearly paying a lot of attention to, and it's this weird thing where, because a lot of the details matched up with 1997's Titanic, I basically took the corroboration as being, well, I guess all the things that are the same in both are probably true, because that's why they're in both. And maybe that's a wrong assumption. Maybe that's wrong, but like, corroboration is usually one of the things that it's like, oh, you actually usually back something up,
The only way that it would be wrong is either there is a fundamental fact that wasn't known until after 97's Titanic as well,
or Cameron's just a big fan of this movie and wanted to use a couple of things.
Exactly, which is very possible.
Which is possible, but
unlikely.
So no, it's interesting. So yeah. I think there's something really odd about this coming right before World War One as well. Like,
yeah,
I don't know. There's something really like there's this like cloud hanging over it where I'm like, yeah, you have no idea that the absolute horrific couple of years ahead of the world, as this is happening. So I don't know, but it's an interesting piece of cinema from its time. That I think is fascinating to sort of visit and sort of compare to the newer movie, see how it was done differently, but ultimately is a piece of cinema to enjoy. I said I might watch it again with the commentary track, because I think that's different, because I'm interested in hearing the.
You just want to hear what they have to say rather than the movie itself.
This will be a nice sort of like stage for them to prompt certain topics and subjects, and it also makes it easier to follow what they're saying, because it's like, hey, okay, they're talking about this event in real life compared to what's on the screen and so on. But I don't think I'm interested in ever watching this movie again as a movie, because
no, likely I never will.
Yeah. So that's what it is. It is the night to remember. There you go. So, yeah. So, I mean, it's a shame, because there's a good chance that the other three films that didn't win might have been better movies for us. But, I mean, if they wanted an interesting conversation, maybe this was one to talk about why it...
I have no idea what the other three films were, so...
Well, I can't remember now. This vote was like 4 months ago. But,
I know. I don't think I ever knew.
So, yeah, that's a night to remember. So, and if you're a fan of this movie, I get it. I get why you would like this. I get why this would appeal to certain people. But as someone who doesn't like history films, typically, it makes sense that this
I like some historical films when I'm more interested in the... To me, Titanic, while obviously a momentous event, I'm not on that. It's not personally interesting to my tastes in history. It's an event. It's relatively recent enough that I kind of know all. I know all about it just generally. Whereas something from longer ago, I probably know less about. So therefore, it's likely more interesting to me.
Are you buying a ticket on Titanic too?
Why not? They'll have got everything sorted by then, right? It's definitely going to be unsinkable this time.
Sod's Law dictates that that'll sink the first voyage. Sod's Law dictates that it's happening again.
Which is why they'll never name a ship it.
No, they'll do it Titanic too.
Sure, but...
This is a thing. I read about this, damn it.
Sure.
They're going to launch Titanic too. I was actually thinking though during this, has like shipping technology gotten to a point where this just wouldn't happen again the way it did? Like, radar and like sensors and just all the tech we have now. Like, is it possible that this would even happen now?
I mean, probably not. But hey, equipment can fail.
Sure.
Human error. People can misread it. All sorts of things could
that's true.
go wrong. I mean, I'd say it's far less likely to happen. But is that just a hubris again?
I don't think so. I think it's a fair statement to say that it's less likely given our technology now. And
it's less likely.
But I almost wondered as well, like, given the way ships are built, is there better safety precautions in the way they're built? Like, because
almost certainly.
Because the way he described this is like, okay, because 5 compartments are filling with water, we're going to sink, right? If it had just been 3, we'd have been fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was just wondering, like, the way ships are built, especially ships that are close to this size. I know this was the biggest, and I don't think anything's topped it, but like, like I'm wondering, like, are they built within a way that's compartmentalized?
It was the biggest, but it did have a sister ship, right, which was presumably the same size. So,
was it?
I mean, if it was a sister ship, I would have assumed so.
I was under the impression that we never actually topped the size of the Titanic, but I mean,
it had. I know it had a sister ship.
Go on, fact check. What was the sister ship called?
There was 3 of them. There was the Olympic, the Titanic, and the Britannic. All 3 were designed to be the largest and most luxurious ships in the world.
What happened to them? Did they sail for years? Were they functional?
One retired, 2 was lost. So obviously,
you have to elaborate on lost there.
Well, obviously Titanic is one of them. The Britannic was sunk by a torpedo in the Irish Sea. She was, the largest ship lost during World War One.
Oh, okay. All right.
And the Olympic was taken out of service in 1935 and scrapped between then and 1937. But got through World War One and served. It was a Navy ship.
Okay. Yeah, there you go. That's a night to remember. Hopefully we didn't upset too many people with our kind of indifferent attitude towards the movie. But as what it is, I think it's just by its nature, I don't think it was ever going to like strike a big chord with us.
No, and I don't think going in, I didn't know that because I didn't know it was going to be this matter of fact.
No, did I? I was expecting more of a central story to it.
Yeah, I knew it was about the Titanic, and then 5 minutes in, we've got the second officer, we've got scene with him and his wife, and it's some banter with people there, and it's very. It feels like, oh, okay, we're establishing a lead here.
Yeah, with some very stuck up people who think he's mocking the Titanic because he's making fun of this soap ad that's there, and he's like, oh, we don't like that talk very much. You should be proud of something that your country's built or something like that. He's got a very like snobby patriotic viewpoint.
Yeah.
And I'm like, shut up.
Yeah, and the wife's like, excuse me, but he's the second officer.
I just like there's so much that I would critique about the country that I just like.
Oh, now more than ever.
Piss off. So whatever. Well, I say I mean England specifically.
I mean, I'll take blame for
Brexit.
Not personally, obviously. That is not on my head. I did my damnedest.
Brexit, but basically every bad vote that's ever went wrong is all entirely to blame with the majority of England. Quite frankly,
that is likely true. On Brexit itself, I personally did exactly as much as you personally did.
No one's disputing this. The point is,
I just do not want to be held personally responsible.
Yes, but the point is, if you look at the map, which entire country voted the correct way? May I ask? Was it England?
No,
it wasn't Wales.
No, definitely. I was going to throw Wales under the bus myself there. I'm not taking full blame for this. Those Welsh bastards are coming down with us.
I mean, I'll give England one thing. At least one city voted the correct way. One little bit of the map.
No, most of the major cities actually did. Yeah. The metropolitan cities.
But in the counties that were counted on the map, the only bit of the map that was coloured correctly was London.
Okay, sure. If you count the entire county, then yes.
That's what I'm counting.
Yeah, but that's not fair. London's just big enough on the map that it gets its own spot.
Yes, London's its own county, but it doesn't change the fact that London's the only part of the whole England map that voted correctly and said, no, we want to stay in the EU.
It is county-wide, but it's not the only city. I dispute that.
Fine, it wasn't the only city. It doesn't change the fact that all the other counties are all shitheads and voted for Brexit.
Yeah. Do you know what's really funny?
Mm-hmm.
Is by the time this is public on YouTube, our Prime Minister might have bloody resigned. We could be in a completely different political situation.
Hopefully he does. Hopefully he does. No one wants Boris.
No, they don't. And I would appreciate it if when we refer to him on air, we could refer to him as Pfeffel.
I'd ask why, but I don't want to hear the explanation. I'm not in the mood. I'm not in the mood. So
it would just make you angry.
I'm not in the mood. I love how I talk a movie about Titanic. Oh, by the way, I do want to critique one more thing. There's one Scottish character in this movie, and they've got him in a tartan scarf, speaking as Scottish as humanly possible.
That's realistic, isn't it?
This was just racism. I'm just going to call it what it is. This was English racism towards Scottish people, and I'm not standing for it. I'm surprised he didn't have a terrier in his hand, and he had a bonnet on, and oh no.
Yeah. There was a bottle of scotch in there at one point.
I'm not standing for it. Bunch of pish. Bunch of pish. Although I did laugh actually. See when they were launching the ship at the start, it was from Scotland. It was from I want to say Clydebank. It was definitely Clyde. Well, because that's like Glasgow in its like heyday back then was a big shipbuilding area, so it makes sense that that's where it was launching from. But because the minute of the commentary I listened to mentioned it, and I was like, oh, I know what that is. I know where it's launching from. But it wasn't actually from what if I heard it correctly, because I was half paying attention to this minute as I was like testing it to see what it was like. But I think they said that the actual ship that were launching in this scene, which was
archive footage.
It was archive footage, but it wasn't of the Titanic because there's no actual footage of the Titanic launching.
No, it was just a different ship that was like, that'll do.
Yeah, I loved though the christening of it though. They had the bottle of booze on a little
champagne
swing.
Bottle.
Yeah, it wasn't like she didn't just hit it off the ship like a proper person. She had to like swing it
into it. Yeah.
I'm like, come on, Liz.
It was good. I like it.
Well, was it Liz? It was Liz Senior, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, wasn't current Liz because I mean she's not that old. No. She's pretty goddamn old, but she's not that old.
Yeah.
Oh dear. Anyway, that has been a night to remember, and hopefully this has been a review to remember. I don't know.
Yeah. all that's left is to rate it.
Oh yeah, aye, that's a good point. Rate it, Connor.
It's been that long.
Mm-hmm.
This might sound unfairly harsh. I don't know, but I'm gonna give it a 6 because it's technically good. I just don't care.
Yeah. It's tough to rate movies like this because it has its place in history, and I can see the spectacle of seeing this in 1950, and I can see the inspiration, and I can see just
it's all that is why I've said a 6 probably feels like it's harsh.
Yeah,
it feels undeserving of a 6, but I don't feel any higher than that on a personal level.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, we've always graded on a curve. It's not like a 6 here means a 6 that, when I rate, Friday the 13th part, whatever, a 6. It's not, I don't mean they're the same. I just mean...
No. You mean you enjoyed that as a, it was very enjoyable, but it's not very good. Whereas this is very good, technically, but maybe you didn't enjoy it as much.
But guess which one I like watching more?
Exactly.
The one that I enjoyed more. even if it's still, even if I can't go any higher than a 6 for that.
Yeah, even if it's objectively a worse movie than this.
Yes, with a lot less effort and money and technical skill and everything else. Yeah, 6 seems fair. Yeah, you know, because as I was watching, I was debating, you know, as high as a 7, thinking that no, it's good because it's doing what it's setting out to do, it's achieving
It
what it's
is.
doing,
Yeah.
but it isn't connecting with me, and I'm not feeling emotionally engaged or scared outside of just the one subplot and some of the rich people making me angry and kind of like getting that point across that the hubris and the idea of possession and like all that side of it and what's wrong with humanity, because ultimately a movie like this, much like something like Chernobyl or anything else that's based on a real tragedy, is usually about how we can avoid it in the future, you know, the human error that led to, if not the disaster itself, but how it was dealt with and the loss that happened after it.
Yeah.
Whereas Chernobyl's a 1-2 punch with that, because it could have been averted and then how it was handled after led to more death. So
Yeah.
you know, that's what it is. Anyway, that is us though. Let us know what you think of A Night to Remember in the comments. If you have seen it, you can, of course, like and subscribe. You can comment and let us know. You can support us in a couple of different ways. You can rate the Apple Podcasts, you know, version of the podcast feed. You can give us 5 stars on there. Helps us out a lot. If you have a different podcast app that also has a rating system, rate us on there too. You can support us financially by going to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV, where you can support us for as little as $1 per month. So go and have a look and see if you want to do that. Otherwise, you can, of course, get us on Twitter at mailed_fuzz for channel updates. And look out for other content that we have. We have 2 other movie review shows, movie podcasts that we do. We have the horror movie podcast that I do with Tim, which is called Screams After Midnight. And we have the science fiction movie podcast that I do with Tara, which is called The Ace, the Atomic Cinema Experiment. So you can go check out those 2 and see if you're into those. But that is us. So thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching movies, guys. And if you can get it, it's always nice to have diplomatic immunity.